Good evening and welcome to the Central Connecticut Intergroup Speaker Meeting. My name is Deanna and I'm an alcoholic.
Hi, Deanna.
Preamble of Alcoholics Anonymous. Alcoholics Anonymous is a fellowship of people who share their experience, strength, and hope with each other that they may solve their common problem and help others to recover from alcoholism. The only requirement for AA membership is a desire to stop drinking. There are no dues or fees for AA membership. We are self-supporting through our own contributions. AA is not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organization, or institution. It does not wish to engage in any controversy, neither endorses nor opposes any causes. Our primary purpose is to stay sober and help other alcoholics to achieve sobriety. And I have asked David to read how it works.
Hi, my name is David. I'm an alcoholic.
Hi, David.
How it works. Rarely have we seen a person fail who has literally followed our path. Those who do not recover are people who cannot or will not completely give themselves to a simple program, usually men and women who are constitutionally incapable of being honest with themselves. There are such unfortunate. They're not at fault. They seem to have been born that way. They are naturally incapable of grasping and developing a manner of living which demands rigorous honesty. Their chances are less than average. There are those, too, who suffer from grave emotional and mental disorders, but many of them do recover if they have the capacity to be honest. Our stories disclose in a general way what we used to be like, what happened, and what we are like now. If you have decided you want what we have and are willing to go to any length to get it, then you are ready to take certain steps. And some of these we balked. We thought we could find an easier, softer way, but we could not. With all the earnest at our command, we beg of you to be fearless and thorough from the very start. Some of us have tried to hold on to our old ideas, and the result was nil until we let go absolutely. Remember, we deal with alcohol, cunning, baffling, powerful. Without help, it is too much for us, but there is one who has all power. That one is God. May you find him now. Half measures availed us nothing. We stood at the turning point. We asked his protection and care with complete abandon. Here are the steps we took, which are suggested as a program of recovery. 1, we admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. 2, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. 3, made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood him. 4, made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. 5, admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. 6, were entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. 7, humbly asked him to remove our shortcomings. 8, made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. 9, made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. 10, continued to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. 11, sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood him, praying only for knowledge of his will for us and the power to carry that out. 12, having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to alcoholics and to practice these principles in all our affairs. Many of us exclaimed, "What an order, I can't go through with it." Do not be discouraged. No one among us has been able to maintain anything like perfect adherence to these principles. We are not saints. The point is that we are willing to grow along spiritual lines. The principles we have set down are guides to progress. We claim spiritual progress rather than spiritual perfection. Our description of the alcoholic, the chapter to the agnostic, and our personal adventures before and after make clear 3 pertinent ideas. That we were alcoholic and could not manage our own lives, that probably no human power could have relieved our alcohol.
God could have would if you were sought. Thanks, David.
Thank you, David. And now, would you please welcome our speaker tonight, Eric.
Hey, Eric. I'm Eric. I'm an alcoholic.
Hi,
Eric.
Grateful to be here tonight. Thank you for asking me to speak. My sobriety date is June 1st, 2004, and it's not my first sobriety date. I will get into that. I'm not going to get into a whole long story. We all know what this program is about. I grew up in New Jersey, broken home, but was given everything as a child, beyond spoiled. Loving parents, it was just a normal childhood. I had the isms even before picking up, though. I mean, I was stealing from my mother and my sister and selling their stuff, just because I wanted attention. I was a terrible student growing up. My sister got all the attention because she was straight A, so my way of getting my father and mother's attention was getting in trouble in school, getting in trouble at home. And that went on for a while. I had my first drink when I was 13 at a friend's house. We were in his basement, and it was just that immediate release for me. My high school years were a utter disaster. I was a year older than everybody, so I had a car first. So people used me to get around, and I looked older, and we would go into New York City, and I had the fake ID, and, a lot of drinking and driving, and, during lunchtime, we would go back to my dad's house where I was living, and we would drink and then go back to school. And I think my school just wanted to get rid of me at that point. They were just like, you're going to graduate, we don't care what your grades are. And I went off to, I always say every time I qualify, my life changed when I went to college. I went to Johnson & Wales University in Providence, Rhode Island. It's like a top-of-the-line cooking school. I don't cook. I don't know why I went there, other than it was the only school that accepted me. They said declare a major. I chose restaurant and hospitality management. I never worked at all in that field. It just was, you have to declare something, declared. This school was one of those where we had classes Monday through Thursday. Fridays were off. I started out with 5 to 6 classes every day. Within the first month, I was down to 2 because the thought of getting up early to go to a class I had no interest in was not happening. There were just a ton of bars in Providence that served minors, and that's where I went. That's where I hung out. I got to know the bartenders really well, and I was a terrible student. I mean, again, I did not apply myself whatsoever. I had walked around the campus with just a lot of anger and a lot of resentment, about the parents' divorce that I never dealt with, and I just kind of suppressed it all down. And 2 weeks before my freshman year was going to be let out, myself and an associate of mine, we set a fire in the dorm we were living in. And this was a brand new dorm for Johnson & Wales. And I remember like it was yesterday, leaving there and the sirens are going off. And I went and I stood across the street, and, the police and the firemen and the ambulance are all coming. And I just stood there, not taking any responsibility that I had just done this. Now, there was a very thin layer of carpet, and underneath was concrete. So, thankfully, the only area that got burned was about the size of a plate in the carpet. Nothing else burned down. Because at the time, this was a Friday night. The dorm was pretty packed with several hundred students. And, even to the last day, I got arrested. I really thought I was going to get away with it. I was going to be able to get back to New Jersey, and nobody was going to know what I had done. But I got arrested the last day of school and spent the weekend in jail. And the prosecutor wanted to use me as an example of when alcohol is involved and you're a college kid, we want to use you as an example. And I was initially facing first degree, which was 25 years. But because I was under the influence and it was my first offense, I was able to plead guilty to 5th degree arson, which carried 5 years probation, 10 years criminal record, and mandated to AA. And I was 19. And, I think about that a lot, and I share about it openly, because I've heard other horror stories from other colleges where, the disaster has happened, where dorm has burned down and somebody was killed. So I went back to New Jersey, and I went, I had to get the book signed, and I would go to the meetings, and I could not identify at all. I sat in a meeting, I was 19, this young kid, and guys and girls 30, 40 years older than me are sitting around talking about losing their families and their homes and their jobs, and I didn't have lost anything at that point, at least what I thought, and after the meetings, I'd go out and hang out with my active friends and just kind of like, go through the motions. The next day, go to another meeting, and, in New Jersey, they do the cake celebration, so I got my 90 days, I blew out the candles. An hour later, I am drinking with my friends. Like, I didn't care. I had a very lax probation officer. I never got urine tested. I never got any of that done. And there was just a cycle. I mean, my dad kicked me out, and I ended up living at this, I don't even know what this house was I was living at. It was just a bunch of old dudes who just sat on the porch, drank disgusting beer, and I literally just sat, and I lived there, and it was right around the corner from my dad's house. And I lived there for several months because he didn't want me. I didn't work. This place was free. They were supplying me with alcohol. I don't know what I was thinking. And then it got to a point where, like I needed a little help. I needed something. So my 21st birthday, I went off to a treatment center. And then they said I needed something more, so they shipped me down to Florida, and I did that for a couple months. And I was not ready. At 19, at 21, I ended up in another place when I was 22, and finally in October of '97, I moved into New York City, and I found a group there, and my mom's in the program, and she had known a bunch of guys there, and she introduced me to these guys, and I went to meetings, and I relied on the fellowship just to kind of get me through. I looked at the board, the steps were up there, I never worked them. I had a sponsor to say I had a sponsor. I never did any commitments. I was just kind of there, and I was young. I mean, I was 22 years old and, dry in New York City and going out with friends and going to dance clubs and things like that and just kind of enjoying, like, my life at that moment. And, but inside I was a mess. I was just an angry, selfish, self-centered, fear-driven guy. And on my 6-year anniversary, I spoke at my home group, and I was living with a girl who I should not have been living with at the time, and qualified, went home, picked up that night. Just like that. Like I didn't just spend 6 years, like, going to meetings. I never worked a program, though. I relied solely on the fellowship to get me through. And for about 4 months, I was out. I was still going to meetings because I had to lie to my mom because she was still there. I was hanging out with still sober friends. But, I mean, I picked up on NyQuil. And then it just kind of spiraled into other things. And it reached a point after about 4 months where I physically started getting sick. Like, I was getting these stomach pains, and it was from holding in this lie. I mean, I thought it was just like cramps, but my stomach was so sick because I was just living this giant lie. And I had a sponsor at the time, and I said, Dan, I got to come over come over and talk to you. And I was living on the Upper East Side, and I took the bus across 79th Street through the park, and I told him. And, and he's like, all right, we're going to go back to Perry Street, the meeting I got sober with, and you're going to put your hand up, and you're going to tell him. And I fought it. I was like, let's go anywhere else. I don't want people to know. I couldn't get humble. He's like, no, that's where your family is. And he dragged me back down there, and I I sat in that room in the back bench, and I remember putting my hand up and saying, I'm Eric, I'm an alcoholic, and I have one day back. And there were, like, that was my family, you know, and nobody said a bad word. Everybody else came up to me and embraced me. And, you know, that was, that was the start of something different, because I knew when I came back in, I had to do everything differently. And I remember there was a mailbox, and it's still there, and I love that group. You know, that group saved my life. You know, there was a mailbox, and after I'd come back in, there was a guy who has since passed away from this disease. You know, I said, hey, Doug, what's going to be different this time? And he said, you will. And that still hits me. It gives me chills. You know, and I knew I had to do everything differently. You know, I still had this guy, Dan, as my sponsor, and he said, what are you willing to do? And I said, you tell me. And we immediately got into the big book, and we got into the step book, and, you know, reading The Living Sober, reading all these things, you know, the grapevines, and going to different meetings, going to step meetings, going to big book meetings. You know, you know, like, commitments were hard to come by, you know, like, people, there weren't that, we had a lot of meetings, but people held on to their service commitments for a really long time. So when you got a chair position, it was like, yes. So I finally was able to start chairing a meeting, and I did that for years, because I knew this was something I hadn't done the previous 6 years. Sitting and doing the steps. Like, him and I sat at a diner on the Lower East Side, and I'm sitting there with this guy, telling him every horrible, disgusting thing I've done in my life, you know, and I was a shut-down human being. Like, I modeled myself after my dad. My dad never cried, never expressed himself, so that's how I thought, like, men don't cry, men don't express themselves. That's how I was, like, raised. Like, that's what I envisioned, and I love crying today. Like, it's like a release, you know? Like, I love being able to express myself today, you know? But for the longest time, I couldn't. So to be able to sit there with this guy and kind of just tell him, and I wasn't judged, you know, and him sharing back with me, you know, and my journey started. And it has been a crazy time in sobriety. You know, there's been, you know, a lot of good. There's been, obviously, you know, life still happens just because I got sober, life doesn't stop. It still happens. Jobs, relationships, you know, family stuff has happened. But, you know, the desire to pick up left me a really long time ago, and that I'm grateful for. Like, I've gone through a lot of stuff, and I have not had that thought, like, a drink is going to make this better. You know? Like, it's just not. Like, I know. Like, I have that reference, you know? And there was a time, you know, I was living down the Jersey Shore, and I got a little isolated from meetings, and it was a lot different than, you know, in New York City, I just had meetings around the clock, readily available. You know, I want to go to a 2 a.m. meeting, and I went to a lot of 2 a.m. meetings in New York City. I would just go, and it was great. And I moved down to the Jersey Shore, and it was a little different, and I wasn't as plugged in and connected as I had been, you know, and I felt that. You know, I found my way to Connecticut, like, in October of 2023. You know, I moved up here. I have family that live up in Avon, and I've spent a lot of time up here before. And, you know, I was bouncing around to different places, and I would, like, walk into a meeting, like a newcomer, and just, like, walk in and leave. You know, like, not somebody who's got, you know, 18, 19 years, like a newcomer. And I found, you know, a group in Bristol, and, you know, I started going there and started talking to people and started talking to guys and was, hey, this is available, do this. And, you know, it wasn't even like a suggestion. It was like, okay, you're voluntold, and I'm grateful for that because it really has changed my sobriety immensely in the last, you know, since I've been up here in Connecticut. It has just opened a lot of doors in sobriety, and I've met people that I would have never met if, you know, even if it's as simple as like cooking breakfast. You know, first of all, I can't cook. Like, I went to a culinary school, but I still can't cook. I can't flip an egg, but I went to a culinary school. So it makes no sense. But, you know, one of the positions of you know, of being, you know, the group's GSR. And that in itself has just been a blessing. You know, being able to go to the meetings and take that information and bring it back to the group and go to the different events. You know, I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful for the trust in that. And, you know, I have 2 sponsors in Connecticut. I still have a sponsor I speak to in New York because I need a lot of help. You know, I'm not drinking, but up here is a mess. It's a mess. I was laid off during the holiday season, you know, which was a complete shock. But again, the thought of picking up didn't enter. It was just like, okay, like, figure out what you want to do now when you grow up, kind of thing. And that's kind of like what I've been doing. I've been afforded to, you know, got the severance, I can get unemployment, blah, blah, blah. But I've gone to a lot more meetings because of it. You know, I just stick close to the rooms, you know, because that's all I know. Because I've tried the way, and again, when I speak for myself, I tried the way of just relying on the fellowship to stay sober. It doesn't work for me. Some people it may. For me, it does not work. I need the entire program. I need to be able to work the steps. I need to go to the big book meetings and the step meetings and to hold on to the service commitments. You know, when I'm down and out, last week I was just like, what am I doing? Nobody's going to hire me. And I was, in my head, I was spiraling. And I quickly thought of the group. I quickly thought of, okay, I need to print this stuff out. I need to put this stuff up. And all that stuff, all that negativity, all that self-hatred and worry, like, went away. You know, just like that, because I thought of somebody else. And I didn't do that for, you know, a long time. You know, I mean, I came back in this time at 29. I'm 49 now. You know, my first meeting was when I was 19. So, you know, I've spent a lot of time growing up in AA, learning how to do things, how to cook, how to, you know, do laundry, like basic things. Like, I've had to learn. And I love it. You know, I love it. And I, you know, as I said before, you know, this guy, Doug, who, you know, helped me get sober this time, who, you know, just couldn't get it. You know, we tried getting him into places, and, you know, he just didn't want it, you know, and instead he drank himself to death, and he left behind, you know, a really young daughter, and, you know, that could be me, you know, and it terrifies me, you know, because I've seen a lot of people go out and a lot of people not come back, and I'm lucky, you know, I know that, because I'm not a first-time winner, you know, relapse is a part of my story, you know, and it took me going through, you know, what I went through to get to where I am, you know, in my life, you know, today. So I'm grateful for my sobriety today. I'm grateful that I have the people I have in my life today, you know, the connection I have with, you know, my higher power and all these things like I never did before, you know, and I'm still learning every day, and that's the great thing. It's like my mind is still open, and I'm going to shut up now. Thanks.
Thanks, Eric.
Thank you, Eric. Again, my name is Deanna, and I'm an alcoholic.
Hi, Deanna.
And I could identify a lot with your story. I kind of handled my college years the same way you did. If it, started out with 4 or 5 classes, and then, I'm not getting to 8 a.m. math class. That's just ridiculous. So I could identify with that and a lot more. And I liked how you talk about, growing up in Alcoholics Anonymous. My sobriety date is actually June 4th, 2004. So I get it, growing up here and learning how to live. I was not 29. I think I was 35 when I came in the room, so you would think I should have been kind of a grown-up, but not. So I could really identify with a lot of what you share, and I appreciate you coming here and sharing your experience, strength, and hope with us. With any?
Thanks, Deanna.
Thank you.
My name is David, I'm an alcoholic.
Hey,
David.
Yes, and your college experience, set the tone for me. When I was in high school, I drank a lot, and I drank alcoholically, but I didn't really have the ism then. It was when I got into college that alcohol became powerful, and my life really became unmanageable, And at the time I didn't know it, but I was a pre-med student, and after my first semester I had a 3.85 GPA, and there's a little voice in the back of my head going, "Oh, you're in a small school, you'll never make it, and I agreed with that voice, and that was the first time that I could, I look at it now, and that's when the alcoholism really hit. It said, that was it. I too got kicked out. I got kicked out 3 times. Twice they brought me back. The third time they said that it's strike 3. But I'm glad to hear that you stayed. I came in when I was 28, and I can't imagine if somebody tried to push me into the program at 19 years old, it wouldn't have happened. But I got here at 28, and it's been continuous, and it's just about the people here. Like meeting Tom, he came down to the meeting once, and he's become a great friend. And the fellowship is just tremendous. So thank you for sharing tonight.
Thank you.
Thanks,
David.
Peter, alcoholic.
Hey,
Peter.
Peter.
11 sober. Thank you for sharing your story. College, that was 8 o'clock class. Right, I had 2 sophomores as roommates. After that, like the first week, I didn't go to 8 o'clock class anymore. And I was asked not to come back after my, I think, the 3rd semester. Because I was more in class. But you shared about your period when you moved to New Jersey Shore. How you got to that point. And that happened when my kids were active in a lot of stuff. I got away from a lot of meetings, and my spirituality tanked a little bit, I didn't pick up a drink, but I wasn't living a healthy life. By the grace of God, I made it back into the rooms, and steps, big book, and doing service work, and that's what I had to do, and now I enjoy life much better today, with me through my ears. That's where my problem is today. Got to keep coming with people like you. Thank you for sharing your story.
Thanks, Peter.
Hi, I'm Cuppy. I'm an alcoholic.
Hi, Cuppy.
I got here when I was about 35, and I got a birthday coming up next week. I'll be 77, and I never had to look back. I was blessed. I think I was just my drinking history wasn't that bad, but it was bad enough for me, and I was soul sick, and I haven't thought about suicide in over 40 years. So go figure. But school seems to be a common thread. I wanted to be a nurse, got thrown out twice, and never went back. So I started out on the dean's list, and I had to beg a guy to give me a D so I could graduate, and that kind of stuff. But I think that without AA and my life today, by comparison, new grandson I've shared with my friends, he's my life. He's my joy, and I get to take care of him. I wouldn't have even had that little guy if it wasn't for Alcoholics Anonymous. I never would have experienced all the great gifts. So I'm living in the bonus round today. That's the way I look at it. I'm living in the bonus round. I'm not going to look back because I try to do what you folks have taught me, the simple, do the footwork. Get yourself, I got 2 home groups in case one breaks. It's as simple as that, and but you have a great message, and I'm glad I was here to hear it. Thank you, Eric.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for a great meeting. Thank you, Eric, for coming to share your experience, strength, and hope with us. And I'll put my glasses back on, and we will close with the responsibility statement. I am responsible when anyone, anywhere, reaches out for help I want the hand of AA to always be there, and for that I am responsible. Thank you.
Perfect.
Well done.
That didn't hurt, right?